What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today we're going to be taking a look at Dracula Destroy, and I'm kicking this video off with a game that I think really showcases the strengths of Dracula in Destroy, and then I'm also going to run through a gold conquest that I played earlier this week, but we're kicking this video off with a pretty good high roll. I've got Nico on draw 2 cards to kick this game off with, and I've got Grandmaster, so I'm snapping on turn 1. I'm going to be able to draw my entire deck this game, so I'm going to have plenty of options for how to make a bunch of power. And speaking of options, there's a bunch of different options that you can play in Destroy as kind of that 12th slot that Dracula is occupying in this list. I've seen Hulkbuster, Taskmaster, Arnim Zola as cool ways to high roll, and I've seen Shang-Chi and Alioth as cool tech cards to play in that slot as well, which is why I was really surprised when I saw this list from Davide get second place in Lamby's tournament last weekend using Dracula in that slot. Now, for those that don't know, this interaction should not actually work in Marvel Snap. It's kind of a bug, it's kind of a relic of like an older system, but this is not something that is going to be in Marvel Snap forever, and that is the fact that if Dracula discards Knull, Dracula will absorb all of Knull's power from its ongoing ability. Knull it's not supposed to have that power from the ongoing ability. No other ongoing cards function in this way other than Knull, so this is something that I will definitely expect to see. The devs have basically confirmed this is going to go away in the future. This should not be an interaction that's in the game, but while it is, it's super powerful, so let's take advantage of it. Now, there's two main payoffs with the fact that you're playing Dracula in your Knull deck. The first is just that it's cheaper. One thing that this Destroy deck is trying to do is oftentimes blow up X23 on the penultimate turn, so that way on the final turn of the game you can drop a Deadpool alongside your Knull and then a free death. However, if you don't have the X23, if you aren't able to draw your entire deck like I am in this game, you might not be able to create that perfect setup, and that's where Dracula really comes in handy, because costing 2 less energy but effectively doubling as an additional copy of Knull that you can just get out there a little bit earlier, kind of, just works out a lot better on the curve overall. In the high roll scenarios, you aren't really going to need it. Like this game, I've got 7 energy, but the other thing that Dracula can do, which is super, super clutch, is play with priority. So here I can play Dracula plus a bunch of other cool cards into the Nexus, and I don't have to worry about getting Shang-Chi'd, which is one of my opponent's only real ways to try to answer this massive Dracula Knull. And even though they have Shang-Chi for my Venom and my Death, all of that power then just gets absorbed into my Knull, which then gets absorbed into my Dracula and is able to give me a win. So when I first saw that this deck had come out, the first thing that I did was jumped into a gold conquest. This was actually on Monday, I believe, before the Infinite Conquest had actually opened up for the season, but I wanted to try out this. I had a bunch of just gold tickets lying around anyways, and I wanted to try out this Dracula Destroy list. It seemed interesting at the very least, and I think I said this already, but yeah, it's basically just stock Destroy, so it was something that I was already pretty familiar with, but I felt like Dracula could solve some interesting problems that the deck has. And I brought this up I've brought this up over a few videos actually, that Hulkbuster is kind of a cool 12th card in the deck, and I know Hulkbuster is now changed by the time this video is coming out. Hulkbuster's a cool card in this deck in terms of the Abbey, also really good for me here, getting to draw an additional card while my opponent draws 2 from Nico. Hulkbuster is a cool card because it's more consistent, I felt, than Arnim Zola or Taskmaster, which require a little bit more high rolly scenarios to actually be useful, but I think Dracula is even less high rolly than Hulkbuster even, and much more consistent. And that's really just the only goal of playing this card, is you want to play a more consistent list to more often be able to make use of Knull. Like, this is a great example. I might not draw, well, I mean, we've got Elysium here, so it's actually kind of like a terrible example because it's a game where I don't necessarily need the Dracula to play out my Knull, which is kind of why I didn't want to start the video on this clip specifically, because I'm actually not going to use Dracula on Knull. I'm kind of going to do a different play here, which I think is kind of fun. Now, it was awkward that I had to play for the Abbey, which was that center location, because now I can't use the Grandmaster as a Deathlock, which is definitely a downside of Grandmaster as well, not being able to use it if your other destroy card already happened to be in the center location. But I do think that the first clip that I showed also showed a huge strength of Grandmaster. Being able to trigger Nico's Draw 2 again is really, really good. And that's what we see out of my opponent here as well. So that's just a really, really strong interaction that allows you to draw your entire deck. This was a mistake, by the way, as well. Should have just played my free Deadpool last turn, and or even this turn, and I would have been able to have it get destroyed with Killmonger, and yeah, wind up regretting that a little bit because I could have had even more power on my Deadpool. Instead, I'm just kind of stuck without any plays this turn, and it's pretty awkward. So I'm going to have to just wind up playing Knull, unfortunately, and kind of telegraphs it here a little bit. But there is not much else that I can do other than just play Knull into Avengers Compound this turn and hope that that is something interesting for me. But like I said, the Dracula being able to then pick up the Deadpool does actually give me some interesting angles. And this was the first game that I had played with this deck, so I'm still learning the ropes here a little bit, but I think what I ultimately found with this game was pretty cool. So now what we are going to do on this final turn, we do have priority, which is awkward. It means that I won't be able to use this Killmonger to blow up my opponent's Deadpool, but I can still use it to blow up my own Deadpool and then discard Deadpool through the Dracula at the end of the game. I'll only be able to kill the Deadpool once, unfortunately, and then I play Death into Avengers Compound because I already have Knull at that location, so I feel like my opponent is going to use their Knull to try to beat mine, and now I will be up by 4 because the Wolverine and then the Death and the Venom are just like the same power. So that was the plan. Gets blown up a little bit if my opponent decides to Shang-Chi me this turn, but if they don't, then I think we are actually looking pretty solid, and we will, oh, they actually have a Dracula themselves, that's right. They do get me in the Abbey, and then we can see that they get to use Dracula to discard Knull, so we get it on both sides here. Both of us getting to use Dracula in a pretty funky way, myself getting to use it to discard the Deadpool, and that will give me a win. I'm gonna skip to the second match now in this Gold Conquest because we got a lot to get through in this video, but that one was basically done. We won an 8-cuber. Interestingly, all of the matches in this Gold Conquest are, I say, like, kind of up against Destroy, because in this one we're up against Loki, and that's like sort of a Destroy list. Get a little bit punished here for not playing out my Deadpool on turn 1, but still with Knull and Death, I think that those are both really good cards against Loki versions of this deck specifically, but I'm also just snapping for Killmonger here. The fact that I can Killmonger my opponent's Quinjet makes me feel pretty decent about my current position, and makes me feel like I will have a decent amount of an advantage here, just being able to blow up that Quinjet. So snap into that, but my opponent is going to have a bunch of cards in hand, and I do think that they wind up playing a turn 4 Loki in this game, but we've got all of the payoff cards. So that's sometimes like the awkward thing when you are playing against Loki, is like they can find better payoffs. But in this case, we've got the death and the Knull. So even if they like destroy some of their stuff or move some things around, we're probably going to have a bigger Deadpool, and we've already got Knull, death, and even the Dracula, just to have everything. The one thing that my opponent could potentially have up on me though is they will still have access to Killmonger from my deck. So that is something that I do have to be a little bit afraid of. On turn 4, I'm just going to play Dracula, just curve it out. It's not anything super impressive here. Oh, and they actually played Miss Marvel on turn 4, and they hang on to the Loki. And then Nico turns into the draw cards ability, but I'm not sure how relevant that is for me because I already have all of the main cards that I need, but looks like I'm still gonna go for it. I guess partially just because it's one more card getting destroyed. Black Bolt makes me lose my Venom. That's Black Bolt from Agent Coulson there. Kind of a silly one. And then we're gonna draw some cards, and the other thing this does, destroying the Carnage, like puts that power into Knull. So that's kind of interesting as well. And then on the final turn, I'm not quite going to have enough energy to play out my entire hand. So this is kind of a weird one where I have to figure out how much of my hand I want to dump and risk like discarding the other cards. So here I'm like 50-50 Knull or Wolverine, but I think it's still worth going for, and my opponent doesn't even battle for Crimson Cosmos since they won't be able to get 2 cards there for Miss Marvel. It's not really worth it for them, so we win this game regardless of what we discard here, but we do wind up discarding the Knull for good measure. And then I do believe, like I said, I played these games almost a week ago at this point, so I might be a little bit shaky on some of the details. I do believe in this next game, my opponent has a turn 3 or turn 4 Loki for me. Might even be a turn 3 Loki with the Miss Marvel. They could be a Zabu version of the deck. Nico gives me a copy of either X-23 or Carnage, and it looks like I decided that was good enough to go for here. My opponent opens up on Quinjet again, so if I find a Killmonger, might be snapping, especially to a pair of X-23s, and then I find Wolverine, so I'm actually going to decide to make a pair of Wolverines instead. Might be a little bit better on the curve, and I can do some fun stuff in the white hot room with Carnage. So I feel like I won't need the extra energy from X-23, and then I find Killmonger. I kind of would have liked to have run out the Killmonger here, but I am just going to continue to develop my cards to blow up next turn to steal White Hot Room before Bifrost blows me up. And Bifrost is a little bit tricky because, oh, it looks like I am deciding to just go for Killmonger here to not give my opponent enough ability to make use of Quinjet is the idea. The Knull is actually really awkward here though with that play. The Carnage could have actually saved me from the Knull by giving me an additional chance to kill this X-23, but now I am looking pretty likely to get bunked over in Knull, and that is going to be the case. My opponent goes for the Loki, but at least they don't have the Quinjet, but awkwardly they will probably be able to beat me in Knull. We're currently tied there because I moved over 4 cards and they only moved over 3, but they still have space to play a 4th card. So that is a little bit awkward. I do have a bunch of energy though, so there is definitely still possibilities to win this game. I can play Death plus Venom into White Hot Room, and that will at least give me a big Knull. We'll see how good that one is for me. My opponent is going to forge Deadpool and grab themselves a pretty nice Deadpool in the process, and then a Venom on the Carnage. So my Knull is going to be huge. I definitely do not have to worry about that. But it is tricky because I have to win both of the other locations, or at least like battle for differential in some capacity. I don't think that I really have it here. I don't need this extra energy, though the The Dracula is slightly better than the Knull. One, to get priority, or to not die to Shang-Chi with priority, and then the other one, since Dracula now adds the power, it's one additional power to play it like this. My opponent does have the Knull, they play it in the Bifrost. I thought maybe they would go for Knull in White Hot Room, but either way, there was no way I was getting out of this one. Probably should have just retreated, saved myself 2 cubes. It kind of felt like, because the end of game was only going to add 2 more cubes onto it, that it was kind of worth it to just go for it and see what happens, but honestly, it was probably never worth it to go for it in that situation. So a little bit of a mistake, unfortunately, but we'll see if we can win them back here. My opponent with the turn 1 Quinjet, me with the turn 1 Deadpool. They do have the Killmonger, so I've been known to snap in these scenarios, but before we do that, actually, I don't have to skip this turn for Collapsed Mine. I could just play Wolverine this turn, and if my opponent skips, then I will definitely have priority, and then I can use Killmonger with priority to blow up Quinjet. So I think this is a case where you actually are not really incentivized to skip for Collapsed Mine, and I'm going to snap. My opponent is going to snap as well, so we are battling for 4 cubes. This is the game if I lose. If I win, I still got to win 1 more. But this could be the whole conquest right here in this Killmonger, and this is like a reasonable start for me, right? Because we have blown up a bunch of cards. That's not going to make Knull any bigger, but it will make death free if I'm able to draw death, or if my opponent is able to draw death. Looks like no turn 3 Loki for us, and my opponent playing 2 cards this game. I guess that is, oh, that's Zabu plus Snowguard. Okay, fair enough. So I did think that they had Zabu. They're probably setting up to play a Loki this turn, and I'm just going to play Deadpool plus Carnage this turn, and I think this is looking like a game that might show off Dracula pretty well, because I'm going to have difficulty playing Knull and Deadpool and doing everything that I want this game, but it might still definitely be possible. And we also don't have to take priority here in any capacity, so that's pretty good as well. I could have used the Venom to kill the Wolverine. I think that both of those are like pretty reasonable plays, and then I'm hoping to draw X-23 or Nico off the top next turn. If I can draw either of those, then I can play that card plus Deadpool plus Dracula, discarding Knull, and I think I'm in a really great spot. My opponent is going to forge their Deadpool, play a Nico, and then probably a Carnage. Yep. And that will also change Fisk Tower into a new location, and then they also threw something into Collapsed Mine. Onslaught Citadel. Okay. All right, well, we could definitely win that location with Knull, but this is one downside of Dracula, and I actually don't even think it's really worth playing for here either, because we're already winning in that location. Oh yeah, Death, actually, the best draw in my deck. What am I saying? So now I can battle for Center, I can battle for Hellfire Club, and I'm already winning in Onslaught Citadel, so I think that this is a really fantastic position to be in, and even though I did not have X-23, I am able to use the Dracula. So what are we? We're 30 minutes into this video, 20 minutes into this video, and I'm finally showing like how this deck is supposed to function, why it was built like this, but this is a great example, and we're able to take my opponent for 4 cubes, and now we have the cube lead again, 4-2. Devil Dinosaur in Onslaught Citadel, not quite enough, and we'll also be able to take them in the, well, that was enough, but we are able to take them in the center location. My opponent is snapping off the rip, but I've got Forge plus Deadpool, and I'm feeling good about it. The deck is like slightly incentivized to play its first destroy card in one of those two side lanes. I talked about that a little bit with Grandmaster. We don't have to worry about Hulkbuster or anything getting in our way either. So I'm just going to load up this Deadpool and X-23 into Stark Tower. And while Hell's Kitchen didn't help us by drawing us a destroy card, drawing one card deeper into the deck will mean that we are now more likely to find a destroy card next turn. So I think we have a pretty good curve here set up, and with Killmonger, that's got to be the perfect draw here. And I can even get a little bit cheeky with it. Luke Spar means that I could maybe play this Killmonger multiple times this game without Grandmaster. So I'm going to go for it and see what happens. This will allow me to next turn play Deadpool plus Killmonger. That seems super great. My opponent is also making use of Luke Spar, though in a totally different capacity, and we will see just how in just a second here. It looks like going to be its Mirage plus Snow Guard based off what we've seen so far, but by adding cards to their hand, they fill their hand, and that means that Mirage gets to stay in Luke Spar. So that's a pretty well played or well executed play there by my opponent. I could choose to just play the Killmonger into Stark Tower this turn, or I could play it into Luke Spar again. I'm not sure what is actually better in this scenario. Putting it into the Stark Tower, I just don't have another destroy card yet. So I'm just going to go for Luke Spar yet again as my opponent continues to develop there, though Killmonger is going to be able to take out the Snow Guard this time. I just thought this was a really cool way to take advantage of Luke Spar that I'm not sure I've ever been able to pull off, at least to this extent. So really, really cool. Now I basically have a free death as well, and I've also got Knull and Dracula and all of this other fun stuff. So have to decide what I'm going to do on this turn. I don't think I'm going to be battling for Luke Spar. I think I'm just going to be trying to win both of these other two locations here. But I think now I'm going to use the Killmonger. Killmonger activating one more time will just naturally, without the Dracula, allow me to play Deadpool plus Death plus Knull on the final turn, which is hopefully going to be enough to allow me to mount a comeback despite my opponent winning one of these locations for free, which is pretty scary. But they have priority, which is great for me because it means now I don't have to worry about getting Shang-Chi'd, and I don't think my opponent can play as much power as I can. I get to play, what is this, 76 power this game? But my opponent has Legion, which I was not expecting at all. A really, really great play from them. I don't know if Legion was actually in their deck or if it was from Agent Coulson, but a really great play that punishes me for not having priority and potentially punished me for not just running out Dracula on an earlier turn of the game. Who knows if Dracula would have hit something good enough, but the game was really close. My opponent was winning by 6, I was winning by 3, I think, or something like that. So Dracula discarding a big card might have just been enough to win the game. My opponent also could have played Deadpool and then played Legion though, so that should have just like done me in there regardless. And then on turn, or on this final game here, we've got Gamma Lab as our first location, and I've got an interesting decision to make on turn 2. I can throw this Carnage into Gamma Lab, which returns the Deadpool to my hand, and then my opponent hits me with a Quake, which is actually going to reward me pretty well for returning this Deadpool back into my hand, because now on turn 3, I can play 2 cards into Gamma Lab and battle for Gamma Lab supremacy here. Raft also shows up as the third location, so that's a little bit scary, but I think if I have to pick one, I will pick a Hulk advantage, and the Raft will actually potentially give me a, oh that's right, they had Snowguard Hawk. I might have forgotten about this in real time too. It's kind of tricky because I'm like damned if I do, damned if I don't, but I think I have to battle for Gamma Lab here and kind of just get punished pretty badly because now I have not developed into the Raft, and I also don't have Hulk advantage. So really, really cool sequence of plays here, controlling these locations by my opponent with Quake and Snowguard and Legion. Fun stuff. I'm going to return the Deadpool to my hand and blow up my X-23, which is nice enough to land back into the raft for me. So we could still grab that card from the raft. This could definitely work out. And Grandmaster also gets to work out really nicely here. I get to fill the raft, then move Killmonger out, destroy my other cards, and I think this is a great setup. So I just have to hope that I get a better card from the raft than my opponent does. And next turn will be the final turn of the game as well. So we'll see if I am able to throw down this Dracula and this Death and this Deadpool. I'm blowing up 2 cards here, so I could play Death plus Dracula. I'll just need my opponent to blow up at least 1 card on this turn, and they will. They're going to play Venom into the raft, and then they're probably going to blow some other stuff up in the Gamma Lab. So we got a game. My opponent's doing a whole bunch of silly destroy shenanigans here with me. Carnage on the Wolverine. And yeah, so now Death is free. Living Tribunal's free. I'll be able to play Dracula, Deadpool next turn. And then I guess I'm just playing Dracula's 1/4. Not super spectacular, but this is what we got. We are in it for the final cubes here. This is definitely the final game, so I'm just going to play down all my cards. It really doesn't matter where I play them either, because I've got Living Tribunal. So I'm just going to play all my cards, press the end turn button, and hope that my opponent did not get a good card from the raft. They got Magneto. That's more points than I got, but they did kind of distribute their points across all 3 locations, so that might be good for me. Shang-Chi doesn't do anything. Quinjet, I mean, that's a lot of power on the final turn for my opponent, but I got a lot of power here as well. Living Tribunal and then Death on top of it is going to put all of my locations to 15, which is just barely enough. Now we are on to the finals of this Conquest, and I mean, I don't want to spoil anything. You can check the runtime of this video though, or don't if you don't want a spoiler. This is going to be a wild one though. This is a really, really fun one to finish this video off, and I think just overall, this has been like a pretty great showcase for different things that Dracula is able to do. And the key here is, like, even in the last game where Dracula wasn't able to do anything, it didn't even give me 1 power with the Living Tribunal. It's okay, because the times that it makes you more consistent are going to outweigh that. And that's kind of like the theme of this final game, in terms of just being more consistent overall. Is definitely going to be something important here. So I snapped on turn 1, I believe, because I had Nico in my opening hand. And when you have Nico in your opening hand, you are pretty likely to eventually find yourself able to use the draw 2 cards mode. And for that reason, I thought it was worth snapping. I'm not going to need to Grandmaster the Nico in this game, because we are probably going to get some of our cards blown up with Hotel Inferno, but I kind of am interested in blowing up some of my opponent's cards. I'm ultimately only going to decide to blow up 2, because I don't want to just use up my Grandmaster. I think I'm going to need all of my resources here, and a free Grandmaster could definitely do something for me. Turns out, didn't really even need to play the Venom this turn. Could have just played the Deadpool and allowed my opponent's Killmonger to destroy it, but they take out my Wolverine, which I think is also pretty great for me. And then I have the opportunity to copy a card with Nico, which is pretty interesting. And I also am not currently in a position where I'm going to be able to blow up X-23 next turn. And that, I mean, I just have to, like, hope to draw Killmonger. I've got 4 cards left in my deck. I guess I could also potentially hang on to Deadpool in case Nico turns into the card draw mode next turn, or I just play Nico and play Deadpool and then use Venom. I could also use Nico to make an additional copy of Grandmaster. It's not the craziest idea in the world, rather than making an additional copy of Deadpool. I might like that. I'm kind of running out of time here though, and I think there were ultimately just too many decisions and I wasn't able to maybe make the best plays or the most optimal plays, but it's also just because I kind of ran out of options here and the Nico wasn't really great for me. Maybe I still should have just held on to it though for a little bit longer, but I'm going to wind up picking up both of these Deadpools, and from here just hoping to draw Killmonger next turn to blow all of them up and then have an additional energy for the final turn of the game. Instead, I'm going to draw Death, which is a little bit unfortunate. So now I will just have to play these Deadpools on the penultimate turn and then hope that Knull plus Death is enough to finish this game out. So we'll see how it goes. Having access to Knull and Death in the mirror is pretty good, and we can see that my opponent goes for Deadpool plus Venom, so they will have a 16 power Deadpool on the final turn. They won't be able to play Knull though, unless they also have Dracula. We have Dracula, and we also have priority, so that is going to make me decide to play Dracula into Baxter Building rather than play Knull, because I don't want to open myself up to Shang-Chi, which I definitely could have done, and Dracula is even one more point on top of Knull, and then my opponent has Arnim Zola from the peak. They were hanging on to that this entire time, snapped on the final turn, and I'm not going to be able to take it there, unfortunately. So that was quite a bummer. The fact that they just had that flipped over Arnim Zola from the peak, the fact that they are playing the Arnim Zola build means that they are a little bit less consistent, but able to go over the top. And in this case, they just got me because the peak allowed them to play a free Arnim Zola. Wasn't even something on my mind there, really. And unfortunately, is going to mean that we are down 2 cubes to 10 on the final game of this gold conquest. And I already said you can take a look at the runtime or not. We're gonna make our best attempt here to come back and try to win this one. This game, I get to play a turn 2 Wolverine souped up with the Forge into Muir Island. It is a little bit awkward that we're not playing Wolverine on one of the side locations for like Grandmaster things, but it is nice that we are getting to start to build a nice little Wolverine here. Both me and my opponent trade deaths from White Palace, and then I'm just going to flop down a Killmonger. Actually, yeah, I don't really see a huge purpose of playing the Killmonger this turn in all actuality. And then one other interesting thing here is Dracula into Muir Island is actually better than it's been in the past, because now Dracula actually gets to keep that endgame power. So it looks like I am just deciding to go Dracula into Muir Island. I don't really need to blow cards up here, considering my opponent is also playing a destroy deck. I do want to destroy some cards so that way death is cheap enough and maybe I can get all of these other cards out of my hand as well. But I kind of like Killmonger as a last turn surprise. Until I draw this X23, maybe I will just run out Killmonger plus X23 this turn, and I'll play both of them into Muir Island, specifically Killmonger into Muir Island, just to get a few more points from that location on top of it all. And looks like I'm actually, okay, I am just going to hang on to the Killmonger. All right, fair enough. I think that that was my initial plan, just gives me some play against potential Deadpools. I mean, my opponent doesn't have Deadpool here, but I think I was also just like aware of the fact that this is like, I can't really afford to lose any games. I could technically lose one game for 1 cube, but I don't really want to. And now we are at a place where I can almost play my entire hand, but it is a little bit awkward. But I think that's still going to be the play here. I'm just going to play Killmonger and then, or Venom. I can play Killmonger or Venom and then a pair of deaths. I guess I will actually just play Venom into Los Diablos and then a pair of deaths. That seems pretty reasonable. And then it's a 50-50 to try to discard Knull to Dracula. Could also retreat here. I think that that would be reasonable as well. But I do have like pretty decent odds to try to win it, and I'm going to use Venom to destroy both of my deaths in this case, and I'm currently tied in Muir Island, winning in Los Diablos, so I think that this does actually play for all three locations. My opponent's going to play Death, Death plus Killmonger. Makes sense. I'm going to play Death, Death plus a Venom here, and I think we've won this now. Unfortunately, the X-23 did not land in Muir Island, but we do have another chance for it to land in Muir Island, and if that happens, then I do win. But I wasn't confident enough that I was going to snap. We are just going to play it out here, and we do indeed get the Knull. So we win the 50-50 there. It would have been a tie had we not, and then it would have been a game about differential, and I would have lost. So it was close. This is a very, very close match. We are both playing Deadpool Destroy here, but I guess, yeah, I mean, there is something to the fact that my deck is like potentially a little bit more consistent. As I talked about, this game I get to play a turn 1 X-23, turn 2 Forged Up Deadpool, so it seems like a really, really good start. My opponent leads on Deadpool, and then I've actually got Murder World as location number 3, but when I draw Venom for the turn 3 play, I think that there's no... Oh, I actually do go for it in Murder World here. All right, that's surprising, but I guess it's just... And again, apologies that I played these games about a week ago, so I don't exactly know all of the plays I'm going to make, kind of trying to just use educated guesses here. But I guess I did the math and saw that if you are doubling the Deadpool in Murder World, then that's better than putting it in Muir Island, and specifically it's better to not waste my Venom. Weird World makes this like kind of a weird game, but also a pretty straightforward game at the same time. My opponent also gets to destroy their Wolverine an additional time for free. So they get 2 free power from that, but I have their Knull. They could draw my Knull. I never drew mine, but at least I have my own, or I have their Knull for the time being. And then I also have both Venoms, which is pretty fantastic. I decide to play their Venom first, so that way they think they might still be able to draw my Venom, because they know that they haven't drawn their Venom. There's some subtle optimization here, but I think it is right to play their Venom first. They've got Killmonger here from this spot, which is going to make my Venom significantly worse and make me wish that I had played to Weird World instead, but I will still get to start blowing up the Deadpool. In the next turn, I'll be able to go Deadpool Venom into Weird World, which will allow me to play a turn 7 Knull plus Deadpool plus potentially Death. Yeah, there's the Death off the top. So I will have a pretty good final turn of this game. I do think I'm winning on Deadpool Supremacy, but it's close. Could have also played Death into Muir Island here just to get 1 free point on it, but I don't think that's going to be super relevant, and the flexibility might also be important here. So my opponent has Deadpool. They've got Grandmaster to move over Killmonger and blow up my X-23 yet again, but I still get the energy from it, so it's not super important that I don't get the 5 power on Venom. The important thing here is just getting it the once, and X-23 flips into Muir Island for my opponent, which I think is a pretty big moment, because now it means I'll be able to easily win in Muir Island, and actually the math works out really nicely that I just get to play Death into Muir Island. That puts me up to 33, and my opponent gets to go up to 32 from Muir Island's end of turn trigger. So that is a really, really good position for me to be in. I know my opponent can't have Arnim Zola. They could have my Knull, right? So that's the only thing that I have to consider. If I play both of these cards to one location, it's really, really like impossible for them to win. But if I play them to 2 separate locations, it also seems impossible for them to win too. So I'm not really stressing about this. Deadpool does beat me, but their Knull doesn't beat my Deadpool. So there you go. We grab 2 more cubes, and now the score is 2-6. We are slowly but surely mounting a comeback here. And this is the point that I was trying to make. My opponent is on the high roll version of Deadpool Destroy, so they were able to get those 8 cubes, which is good, but you gotta get 10 cubes. And I think that makes this build of the deck, specifically for tournaments — this was originally a tournament deck — and for Conquest runs, playing Dracula might just make the deck more consistent, and thus it might be the better option to play. Muir Island pops up for a 3rd time in this in 3 successive games. What else was I gonna say? I don't know. Not a great hand. I don't know if there was anything else I had just meant to say and forgot about. Castle Blackstone is kind of interesting though, and Nova Roma means we get to draw a card. I'm blanking. If there was another point that I wanted to make, I am blanking on it. A little bit awkward here to have used the Carnage, but I kind of want to, like, the Deadpool gets just as big by just staying in Muir Island, but there is some other interesting maneuvers I can do here. One, I can use Grandmaster to move the Carnage into Castle Blackstone to potentially win that location to get the +1 energy each turn. I also could have played Deadpool center and then Carnage to the Deadpool, which interestingly would have allowed me to win Castle Blackstone and given me the extra energy here. Would have given me the exact same size of Deadpool, though Deadpool would already be in my hand right now. And then I'm just going to play a Dracula into Castle Blackstone this turn, tie it up, use my energy efficiently. I don't know if I can like super defend any of these choices so far, but the fact that Deadpool is just like getting bigger in Muir Island is fine. And a lot of times the mirror matches here just come down to, oh yeah, my opponent plays Killmonger to blow up my Deadpool, so sure, I'll take it. But a lot of times these mirror matches come down to Killmonger actually being a pretty important card, and then just drawing Knull and Death. If you can get a huge Deadpool ball started, it's good, but if you can't, you don't necessarily need to. And this game I like kind of go a little bit back and forth on it both ways. Again, still haven't snapped. I'm not like super impressed with my plays or my position here, but I get to turn some things around here. I will be able to make Death pretty close to free, and if my opponent destroys 1 card, then Death will be free. Plus I also have the Dracula, which means I could actually still weave a Killmonger in here if my opponent were to develop a Deadpool of their own. But doesn't look like they're going to. They're just going to play Death plus Wolverine, which actually does mean that Dracula comes in handy here. I was thinking like, oh, Death will just be free, but because it isn't free, now I can just play Killmonger, Death, Deadpool, and Nico off the top, though we get Wolverine, but we have an extra energy. So yeah, Wolverine works too, and Grandmaster even could have done a little bit of something, but I'll be able to dump my hand. This is the important part. I'll be able to dump my hand, and then I will be able to discard Knull to Dracula. So that should be really great here, and I'm just looking to play around my opponent playing their Knull in Castle Blackstone, and then I'm going to battle for Muir Island by playing all of my other cards on that location. I'm not putting anything in Nova Roma. That might be a mistake, but my opponent's X23 is also pretty likely to pop out of Nova Roma. And then they do have an Arnim Zola here to finish things off, but that's just going to make my Knull even bigger, which means I've won this game. A lot going on. I don't even remember if I was like considering the Arnim Zola at the time, but now with that Arnim Zola play, I definitely win. So maybe I was considering Arnim Zola as a potential option for my opponent, which is why I didn't play to Nova Roma at all. I'm going to be honest, I'm getting a little bit tired recording towards the end of this video, but I do want to get it out tomorrow. So I'm pushing through it, and we are pushing through this Conquest to slowly get back 2 cubes at a time and get ourselves back into it. It's a long video, and tomorrow is also going to be a super long video. I recorded that one like 2 days ago, releasing them a little bit out of order. But yeah, subscribe and stay tuned for more sweet Destroy content. That's all I'll say. Tomorrow's video is really fun. I'm taking Destroy into an infinite conquest, and I'm going to do live commentary for it. I already did live commentary for it, but that should be a really fun one for people that are interested in like really in-depth breakdowns. I'm explaining all of my plays live in the moment, so I think the commentary is like a little bit cleaner than the commentary in this video, but it's, you know, I'm almost an hour deep into this video, and I'm kind of killing it here still because I'm like delivering plugs for other content is best as I can do here. So cut me some slack. I think we are doing quite all right. I'm going to develop my full board into sewer system here on the idea that my opponent might be about ready to play themselves a Killmonger. That's the idea, and we do catch it. So that is really good for me to get to bring the Deadpool back to my hand. I played all the cards into sewer system, partially, I think, potentially under the impression that, oh, wow, that is insane. Okay, my opponent should just retreat right now. I forgot how crazy this game was. They're gonna blow up both of our X-23s multiple times. Death is now free. Deadpool gets cheated in out of Sakaar, and then gets blown up by Killmonger again. Well, it makes sense that I'm like talking about other things while this game's going on, because this game's basically just on autopilot at this point. I consider... Oh... Okay, so I could use Carnage to blow up Death, and then I would get an additional copy of Death in Valley of the Hand. Oh, and Dracula. So I could just send everything to Valley of the Hand right now, but there's actually not a huge incentive to send Dracula there immediately. I could actually, yeah, just while I have the energy, play Dracula into sewer system right now. This is really cool, though. I'm not sure if it's actually right, but it's cool. It's cool nonetheless. My opponent uses Nico to blow up Deadpool. They are going to get, so I'm going to get back Forge and Death, and my opponent is going to get back Killmonger. Oh, which means I should have kept this Deadpool. Oh, no. Turn 5 hasn't happened yet. Okay. So now I can play Deadpool. I think I might forget to do it here. Yeah, I think if I'm remembering correctly, I did not realize that my opponent was going to get another Killmonger out of Valley of the Hand. But what I should do is I should play Deadpool and have it get destroyed by Valley of the Hand by my opponent resummoning a Killmonger. But I think I just missed the interaction there, which is understandable. There is a lot going on. So they forge a Deadpool again. Oh, okay, so they're actually not guaranteed to get Killmonger here because they'll only get 2 of all of these cards. And now Arnim Zola has joined the pool. They do get the Killmonger though, so that was a mistake. And I throw up the Deadpool emote to indicate that. Could have had a 48 power Deadpool here. They'll also grab Nico, which puts them in a little bit of a bind here. Oh, but this is fantastic. So I could have high rolled even more than this, but I do get to make a pretty great play here that I think is like unique to Dracula builds of the deck. I think this might have also been the first game in this conquest as well. I think it was, but it's an hour later at this point. But killing Deadpool intentionally on the final turn of the game to return it to your hand as the only card to absorb from Dracula is pretty dang sweet. So that's what we wind up going with on this final turn here. My opponent has the Wolverine to soak up Nico. Because Nico was active again, it actually prevents my opponent from just like playing Knull or something on the final turn. So very awkward for them here. They're gonna Venom, and that's not even enough to take it in the sewer system, and they lose basically every location with a tie in Valley of the Hand thanks to their Wolverine. But Really crazy game there with a lot of fun stuff happening. Missed a whole bunch of points. I left a huge Deadpool on the table, so that is unfortunate. Could have been an even crazier high roll, but what a crazy Sakar turn for them to play Killmonger, destroy my Deadpool, then Deadpool comes back, and then they blow it up again with Arnim Zola off the Killmonger. Really crazy. Now, regardless of how this one goes, I think this has been a really fun Conquest, and I do think there is some value in how tragically bad some of these games have been for my opponent, just for my ability to like maybe get under my opponent's skin a little bit. And yeah, I think that is definitely worth like considering at least a little bit. There's nothing I can do on that. I'm just playing one more game for 2 cubes here, but that is nice. White Palace is also pretty nice for me. I get a death from my opponent and give them a Dracula, which isn't a combo with Arnim Zola at the very least. I have to play a little bit off curve here if I want to use Nico to draw 2 cards, but I do believe I want to use Nico to draw 2 cards, and we'll just let my opponent, again, do all of the setup for making my death cheaper and stuff. I do draw Grandmaster here, which is not, like, super useful, but and I'm only really going to wind up drawing 1 card with Nico, despite Nicoing Grandmaster. The one, it doesn't really work if you just play Nico and then play Grandmaster immediately after that, because the Grandmaster trigger actually destroys itself if you haven't seen this interaction before. But also, I'm going to deny myself a draw by having a full hand here and not being able to draw a card next turn. But regardless, I think that I'm like reasonably well set up. I'll just have to blow up this X-23 a few times here, but that is definitely still possible. And I guess I can really only blow it up once, but I could maybe hope that my opponent also blows it up once for me or something. And I'm just going to play X-23 plus Dracula by the looks of it and hope that my opponent destroys a bunch of stuff. Oh yeah, this Killmonger is too good to pass up on, isn't it? It will activate my opponent's death, but I've got 2 deaths, so I think destroying 5 cards is right here and guarantees that I've got an extra energy. And I also don't really have anything great to play this Dracula with. My opponent throws their Dracula into Throne Room, aka Asteroid M, and then plays the Forge, which is just another card for me to poop on with Killmonger. And now both of our deaths are going to be completely free. And when I say both of our deaths, I mean both mine and my opponent, but also both of mine, which means now I can play like Death, Knull on the final turn. That's not out of the question. I could also go Dracula Venom Death and have Dracula be a 50-50 to either discard Knull or Wolverine. So it looks like that's actually what I'm going to go for here. With another death, I could throw my Dracula into well, this is the exact same play, really. Yeah, this is the same play that I was just looking at a second ago. I guess I don't know. Yeah, it doesn't really change anything. My opponent plays Death into Throne Room and then Arnim Zola. So this is like reasonable, but it's not actually that great. It only creates a 14 power death, not a 28 power death. And this game gets really, really close here in the end. Venom is going to move over, and then my Dracula is going to move over, and it's just going to come down to this Dracula 50-50. My opponent discards Venom, and I discard Knull, because of course I do, because I'm NoLucksGiven, baby. And that, with this, is going to be the end of this video. It's a long one. There is actually one more thing that I want to say, though. Apologies if this commentary is a little bit sloppy. I am quite tired, but wanted to get this out as Friday's video. It doesn't need to come out Friday. They're not going to be nerfing this Dracula interaction like today, but they are going to nerf it, and that's just the last thing that I wanted to talk about to finish this video off. Yesterday, I put out a video kind of like detailing a few different options for destroy decks. And this was one of them because this deck is really sweet, but one of the decks that I brought up doesn't actually work yet, but will probably work eventually. So let me get into the collection here, a little bit of lag as I am recording. So I shared this Dracula list, but then I also shared this Ravonna list yesterday. I asked a few people before I made yesterday's video live, does Ravonna work with Knull? And across the board, everybody said yes. I tried it out. Ravonna does not decrease the cost of Knull, unless I'm missing some other weird interaction that came up during that game. I didn't want to lose more time and rating trying to figure it out. So this interaction should work. The Dracula Knull interaction eventually will not work. And if you think about it, it makes sense. Ravonna works with Darkhawk, and it works with, I don't know, really just Darkhawk, Morbius, but Dracula does not work with any of those cards, and Knull is just like the odd man out, despite also being an ongoing ability. So while I do like the functionality that we were able to make use of throughout this video with this deck, I do think that I will also enjoy this functionality once they fix the card as well. So this deck does not currently work, but once Dracula doesn't work, this deck probably will. So something to look forward to in the future, but for today, that's going to be it for me. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.